Disclaimer. This podcast features a conversation between two individuals regarding assistive technology. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed during this episode belong solely to the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of their respective employers. Furthermore, this discussion is for informational purposes only.
Hi, welcome to Assistive Tech Today podcast. I'm your host, Vinny Lavodi, and today I have a special guest, an old friend, Noah Kravitz. He is the tech guru, and he's an AI expert, in my opinion. But I've just a quick background on me. I'm an assistive tech specialist. I work for a company called Enabling Devices. I have been an AT consultant for them for the last 24 years. And the company this year celebrates its 50th year in business, serving people in the special needs community. And I'm going to welcome Noah, and then I'm going to tell a little story about how Noah and I met. So Noah, welcome to Assistive Tech Today podcast. So happy you could join us.
Thank you so much, Vinny. I'm so happy to be here. And I don't, you probably told me and it slipped my mind, but 50 years, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Congratulations to
yeah.
you and everybody.
The founder, Dr. Stephen Cantor, had started the business back in '76, and he's passed away a few years ago. But his son is now the CEO and continuing the legacy to help people
Amazing.
with special
Yeah,
needs. So,
very cool. Very cool.
so, and that's a great segue into telling how Noah and I met. So, my boss, Dr. Cantor, had grabbed one of these streaming devices. This is going back in 2010, 2011, and a Roku. And he said, "Hey, do you think we could do anything with this? Do you think we could adapt this for somebody with special needs? I don't know much about it." So he gives it to me because I was the tech guy. So I started playing around with it, and I came upon a internet TV station called Revision 3, one of my all-time favorites. I wish it was still around. So I started watching a few tech shows, and I learned a lot. And one of the tech shows that I got to watch was a show called TechnoBuffalo. And who do you think was the host of that show? He was the editor at large, Noah himself. And Noah was covering consumer electronics, cell phones, iPads. That's when they were really big. And that was actually the turning point for assistive technology, where, that kind of technology, was big, and people were looking at ways they could use this for kids and adults with special needs. So long story short, about a year later, I was following Noah's career, and he started a project called the Tabula Project, and he was trying to bring tablets for education. So we wound up collaborating a little bit, working on that together. But that's how Noah and I met, and I'm gonna turn it over to Noah and let you guys hear from Noah about a little bit about his background and what he's done and where he's at now. Take it
Sure.
away, Noah.
Man, it's funny when I congratulated you and the company, I was like 50 years. And as soon as I said it, and as soon as you said 1976,
hmm
I had a little reality check of when my own birthday is. And I was like, oh, 50 years is nothing, man.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you again for having me. It's great to talk to you. We haven't actually spoken. Everything's over, text so much these days, text and email and stuff. So it's good to speak face to face, even if it's over the internet. My background, so right now, I work for NVIDIA. I host their AI podcast, which I have been hosting for a while now, going on 8 years. But I only joined the company full time last August, so not even a full year yet. And so I host the podcast, and I'm a writer in the enterprise marketing group. But to go back, you've got my brain going down memory lane here with the 2000s, 2010s, and all the consumer tech stuff. I've always been interested in tech and gadgets and computers and such. But I never. I learned in college that I did not have the frame of mind just naturally. I'm not wired to sort of have the mental discipline and ways of thinking that seem to make for successful software engineers and computer developers and
Hmm.
such. And so my career instead kind of went along the lines of writing and sort of blogging and journalism and such. And yeah, I was and teaching at the beginning, right? I was working in schools after college. I went to New York, and I lived in New York for 8 or 9 years. And during that time, I taught at a K-12 school for 2 years. I taught computers, and then I taught at a public charter school that was, I think, K4, K6, an elementary school
Was
in New
there
York.
much was there much assistive tech back then, or it was pretty much in its infancy with the
Yeah, I
with the
mean,
with the
this is
it's before the iPad,
this
which was like one
this
of the
is
biggest things,
90. Yeah, my first teaching job I think was 98.
right?
Well, I know that I was at that job for 2 years, and one of the years, one of my kids for a holiday present gave me a book called Y2K. It's already too late. So I guess it must have been like
Yeah,
99.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And so we were doing and you'll have to guide me in this conversation about what
yeah,
assistive tech, because I'm going to speak more broadly and you
right,
can hone me,
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, the internet was brand new, right? Like I remember in 95, my senior year of college, using like Mosaic, Netscape browser and stuff for the first time.
yeah,
And so yeah, by a few years later, we had a line at the school. It was still, I remember that I was really interested in how to sort of infuse education
with tech,
with tech, right? And I went to grad school in New York, and I started in the summer, and then I saw this ad. They were looking for a part-time computer teacher, and I applied, and I wound up getting hired full time. So I was teaching and in grad school kind of at the same time, right? And it was really interesting because the tech was segregated from the school for the most part where I was. The computer lab was like, we're doing computer things,
right?
And like there would be some crossover, but not to the extent that I was
Like it,
necessarily
yeah,
interested in.
like it
Yeah.
is today,
Yeah. And then my grad program was all teachers and school administrators and faculty who were looking to get out and get into software to make more money. So,
right?
it was still kind of a little bit or compared to today, much less integrated. But yeah, assistive tech wise, like I don't even remember if text to speech, like where text to speech was at back then. We were using HyperCard for a lot of stuff in the lab. I was teaching
Right,
beginning programming on HyperCard and
right,
yeah. But yeah, so kind of just to sort of to fast forward through my career a little bit, just for context. I've had a million jobs. And I mentioned that I was freelance, hosting the podcast freelance
yep,
until recently. This is the first time I've had a full-time job in like at least a decade. So, I've done a lot of kind of different things. The through line has always been tech and communicating.
right,
And so it was a lot of school-based work early. And then I moved out to California and I taught at a school here for 2 years. I think I was like the assistant director of technology. I mean, it's a
hmm,
three-person department. So, but like, and at that point, that was more like 2003 to five-ish.
yep.
Um, you know, the web and like cell
And the i
phones,
and the iPhone hadn't come out yet, wasn't it? 2004, I think the iPhone came out.
yeah, the first iPhone hadn't come out yet. And that's when I did that job for 2 years and realized that I wanted to be more in the tech world than the
Right,
education world. Partially because I worked with some really great teachers and saw the dedication it took, and partially because my interest in tech was just kind of
right,
driving me more, right? And so that's when I wound up finding my way into reviewing phones and reviewing gas. I'd done some of that previously, but
right,
that's kind of when it started to turn into a full-time thing.
right.
Yeah.
You basically were on the dawn of the smartphone and all the tech that was coming down the pike. Like you were right in at the ground, let's say like the ground level, the ground floor,
Yeah. You
which
know,
is
it,
kind of exciting because that was like, I mean, tech comes out today, it's exciting. Like AI is super big compared to some of the stuff that's been out. But like when that iPhone first came out,
yeah.
I read the book, Steve Jobs book, and the guy who
Oh, Isaacson?
Why, as Xing said,
Yeah.
he's like, when he was talking to Steve, he's like, you need to come out here. I'm going to be launching something. It's going to be the biggest thing. And he was going to CES, and he's like,
Right. Yep.
forget CES. You got to come
Yep.
to this.
Yep.
And he's like, I can't. I have appointments.
Yep.
And he said that when that phone launched, normally I know Mike Apple does the Worldwide Developers Conference. They have their own thing, you know.
Mhm.
He said that nobody talked about CES that year. They were
Yeah.
just talking about the iPhone, and he was right. Steve Jobs was right. He was
I
a
watched
visionary.
this is a fuzzy memory, so it might not be correct, but I do have this memory of watching an Apple keynote in a hotel room in Vegas because I was there for CES. And I think it was that one. But
Yeah,
but whether it was or not, absolutely I mean Isaacson would know obviously, but
yeah.
spot on. Like everybody was talking about the iPhone, like BlackBerry, just immediately everybody was talking about this is the end of BlackBerry. I remember like Nokia. I mean, this is sort of post iPhone.
Hmm.
Their demise really started because they didn't play it right. Yeah, no, it was huge. It was shockwaves. But yeah, I was sort of fortunate that I just fell into this. Fell into I was looking for a new phone. And I was browsing ads on Howard's forums is what it was called. It was this
Hmm.
old like cell phone forums hangout on the web for like really, people super geeky into it. And I saw an ad looking for phone reviewers. And I had been writing about the Mac ecosystem back in New York for a
Right.
website called PowerBook Central. It's kind of where I got my start on tech writing. And so I emailed these guys and I borrowed somebody's Moto Razor to write a review of it. And that's kind of where it started with Phone Dog, and then that led to I was with them
TechnoBuffalo.
for a while. And yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, the iPhone came out and pre-iPhone, it was all about like how many buttons could you fit onto a phone while it's still being usable?
Right.
Because there were no touch screens or there were
It
like
was
resistive
BlackBerry
touch screens.
was the king. Was the
Yeah,
king before that.
exactly.
He
Yeah, yeah,
really
yeah,
was.
yeah.
My
Yeah, and
brother
then
loved
everything
his
changed.
he loved the
And
BlackBerry with that keyboard.
yeah, no, man, Crackberry, right? To your point though, when iPhone came out and then Android came out, all of the buttons were gone, right? And it
Right.
just phones became this. Phones
Just a
became
slate of
a
glass.
slab of
Exactly.
slab of
Yeah.
glass. And it got, I mean, for me personally, sort of as the functionality of that went way up, my interest in reviewing phones went way
Way
down
down.
because I was like a hardware guy. Like
Right.
I was fascinated and I always just loved like, you know, like there were these Windows phones that came out just before
Yep.
iPhone that were impossible to use because they had like 9 million buttons and a little
Hmm.
D-pad you couldn't, and everything. But they
Right.
were trying to like make the phone a computer,
Right. Right. Right.
and it's sort of ironic just for me that like when Apple kind of, made that happen for real, one of the big factors was going to the all touch screen and then the hardware, the hardware variety disappeared, within a couple of years. And then it was kind of like, not
Yeah.
as exciting for me anyway. But,
Right.
but, to that point you made about AI, I mean, I, uh, I got out of the, reviewing phones and gadgets and stuff because I was just burnt out on it and everything. And I kind of like professionally wandered around a little bit. I did the Tabula thing.
Right.
And that was a great learning experience for me. And I got to meet a bunch of people. We were talking
Yeah.
offline about some other people we work with a little bit. And I learned a lot. It didn't, go anywhere, so to speak. But
Right.
yeah, then I came out of that, and I think it was right around that time that I like turned 40 and had a second kid. And I think we bought our house. We got super fortunate. We were able to buy a house. And I was kind of like, oh man, I need like a real job. Like, yeah, I'm a grown up
Yeah.
now. And I went and I worked. I got hired by Nokia,
I was
actually.
gonna say you work for Nokia.
I worked for Nokia, and I was just like so excited to go work for one of the phone companies. And less than 3 months after I started, Microsoft acquired us and announced they were basically laying off all the Nokians.
Right.
So that didn't last too long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that when they pushed the Windows? They started pushing the Windows phones. So I remember they were pretty
it,
big for a while. They didn't,
it was at the end of that.
right? Yeah, yeah.
Like I was hired actually as the editor-in-chief of the Nokia developer website, and it was Windows phones, and it was they had a platform called Asha that didn't really go anywhere. But then Microsoft ate him up, and everything was like, Windows Phones was already there, and Microsoft was already pushing really hard and spending a lot of
Where
money
they
courting
were trying to
developers.
like go against BlackBerry and I guess to
Yeah,
get the
and
business
against
clients.
Apple,
They
and
wanted the
yeah,
business clients, right?
yeah,
That
yeah,
that whole convergence thing, because I remember when that they were like, the Windows phone can be like the computer that's
right.
mobile. I remember
Hmm.
Ubuntu tried with Unity. They were trying to create. They had a phone. The hardware, unfortunately, because when Ubuntu is Linux and it's open source, even though it's a commercial company that developed Ubuntu, they had this phone, and the hardware was mediocre by even by what was around then. They were trying to have this whole thing where you basically would take their phone, it would be the Ubuntu UI, it would look like a phone, scaled down a phone, and then you'd put it in a dock, and then it was
Right,
going
yeah,
to give
yeah,
you the desktop experience.
yeah.
But it never got traction because it was running on Android and it looked cool, but I think just there wasn't enough adaption. People or iPhone was already and a regular Android, they were pretty much the two
Hmm.
dominant forces. So it
Yeah.
was so hard to get people to go to
There
something
were
else.
there were a number of plays like that. I mean, even within the Android world, Samsung had a thing called Dex, and they had a few iterations of it. Similar, it was a desktop dock. I think it's where Dex came
Right.
from. And you drop your phone in there, and it had a bunch of ports on the back for monitor and speaker and keyboards and all that. And I think, like, thinking about it now, I want, these plays to like bring the phone to sort of extend the phone's functionality physically to make it a part of your work life. I think what happened instead is just that like the phones themselves just got more and more capable, and people started doing more and more stuff on their phones, and it forced the workplace to adapt and kind of say, all right, like let's make your phone part of the workplace kind of thing.
Right.
But I don't know. It's interesting now just with all this phone talk, and I don't want to. I'm happy to talk phones, but
Yep.
I want to talk assistive tech, obviously.
Right.
But just to mention with these folding phones that have come out recently, Android, and now there's rumors that Apple's gonna do one. We'll see.
Hmm.
Um, I think like this notion of I mean, the phone as computer changed so much
Right.
just culturally and how the world works, and like Americans being addicted to our screens, and
Yep.
people in remote places like having a bank account for the first time because they have mobile currency,
Right.
and
Right.
that
Right.
enables them to like start a business, and like it just radically changes life. And
Exactly.
this so that whole idea that you can have a phone in your computer, or I mean a computer in your pocket via a phone,
Right.
I think like just really reshape things. And uh yeah, I mean,
Now with harnessing AI, which is what you
I
talk a
paused
lot
because I
about.
was going to go there, but I didn't want,
Yeah.
it's your podcast, not mine,
Yeah,
so I
yeah,
didn't.
yeah. No, no. This is what I wanted. I wanted you on here because I mean, we'll get in. We're covering assistive tech, but it's like this is the stuff that's made like such a huge leap. Like I said, when the iPad came out, it was big, but once it was out a few years, there was incremental advancements, but nothing earth-shattering. I think AI has been like the biggest thing. There's a love-hate with it. Either you love AI
Sure.
or you hate it. Do we need better guardrails with it because it's so powerful, what it can do?
Yeah.
So that's your expertise because you
Yeah.
cover basically what's going on in every part of, mainstream
Yeah.
what AI is involved in.
I mean, it's a really big deal. I couldn't think of anything to say that wasn't going to sound like I was being corny and underselling things, so I just figured I'd say it that way. Like, it's not, it's not a flash in the pan. It's, the discipline started 60 years ago, right? Like in the late 50s, 60s, scientists were trying to figure out machine intelligence. And so it's been a long story, and this what they call the AI winter period, and then it kind of came back. And so like it's not like this new thing that somebody invented and tried to cash in on. That doesn't mean people aren't trying to cash in. I'm just saying, like, there were early in the kind of generative AI resurgence that, or the generative AI wave that brought this resurgence of interest in AI that's now turned into this fever pitch. Like, it's hype and it's like very much a lot of resources are being put in, and there's a lot of, like you said, there's good and bad, and there's, people love it and people hate it and everything. But the what was I going to say about the generative AI? Lost my train of thought. Sorry. Just that before, oh right, that when that first started happening, I was hearing these uh comparisons to the AI bubble and crypto.
Hmm.
And I don't
Right.
want to talk about crypto, but just to like, for me, and granted, at that point, I'd been working with NVIDIA off and on for it's been like 15 years now at least.
Yeah.
I'd been doing the podcast at that point for 5, 6 years, whatever it was. So I have my biases, right? But
Sure.
it was also just kind of like we're at a point now where I don't know what's the best way to say it. A really good friend of mine who is around my age and is a father, has girls and of school age, right? And the oldest is in high school now. And I remember he said to me, this is a few months ago, but recently enough, somehow I think the topic of my job, we were having dinner one night, catching up, and how's work? I'm talking about work, whatever. And he's like, man, I hate AI. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, why? And he's like, because like AI to me is just people being able to like make deep fakes of my kids and post them places. And like that's real. That's happening and it's
Hmm.
huge. And as a parent myself, like, yeah, it's like awful and terrifying. By no means is that all it is, right?
No.
And sort of extrapolate from that, like generative AI and chatbots writing things and copyright issues and all of these things, models being trained on copyrighted materials and all of these things happening right now are very real and they're getting a lot of attention
Right.
rightfully. But if that's not all AI is or was or will be, right?
Right.
Like machine learning, computer vision, and all of these things that kind of predated generative AI, this kind of AI now that,
Right.
LLMs and chatbots that can generate things, right? Like, I guess, and I feel like maybe I'm sounding defensive. I don't mean it that way, but like, it's also, it's so much else, right? And there's so much, I think where I'm trying to go with this is to say that like, there are both a lot of issues that are rightfully getting attention, like I said, with, everything from copyright issues to
Right.
um
Like
to,
these
to
actors too.
environmental,
Like
you
they
know,
have AI generated like actors. Like,
right, like all of this, environmental issues, societal issues, what is this going to mean
right.
going forward, so, right? Also at the same time, incredible advances in physical sciences, life sciences, healthcare, y- all of these, the podcast, like, has been such an amazing. I'm so privileged to be able to do it because I get to talk to these people who are building it and doing
Right.
it, and the stories from people who we're doing more kind of business guests lately because that's kind of where the company's at and the industry's at, right?
Sure.
But kind of earlier, before AI had blown up so much in the mainstream consciousness, we're doing a lot of episodes with people who like kind of figured out on their own, like a doctor who figured out how to use an AI tool to help, efficiency in his
Right.
practice,
To
sort of,
comb through data to basically where
yeah,
it would take him out, hours or weeks to pull with a machine. You're like, I need to target something and it knows how to
right.
read through all that and find it.
Yeah, and all of those, I think talking to all these like hands-on practitioners who again, like some were kind of computer people to put it that way beforehand, and
Mhm.
others weren't at all, right? And
Right.
and they heard about the tech and they had an idea for how it could help, what they do or help the people who they work with or what have
Hmm.
you. And I think those stories really kind of like spoke to my own sort of, tinkerer, like try to do
Right.
stuff myself ethos. And then also just like the fascination I've always had with technology, right? And so yeah, it's this time now where like there are so many things available if you have an internet connection.
Hmm.
Because so much of this stuff runs on the cloud, so you
Right.
can run it from your phone or from,
Right.
an older computer as long as you just got an internet connection. Um, there are so many things that you can just like do or figure out to do or find the tech, and now the tech can like help you figure out how to do it.
Right.
And thinking about the work that you do and how we
Right.
met,
Right.
things like read this text aloud, translate this text into a different language, change the font. I don't know if the Open Dyslexia font actually works or not. I don't know if it just
Uh-huh.
popped into my head because one
Right.
of my kids is dyslexic. Um, but just things like that that can take the information and now it's malleable. We
The
have all these digital tools that can make
Yeah.
it more malleable so that, if if you are an auditory learner, right? If you just do better listening than reading, you can have somebody at work the other day was telling me about how they use Google Notebook LM, which is an AI tool. It's a research tool originally,
Right.
and it allows you to load a lot of source material into it and ask questions of it, or ask it to summarize, do things with source material. And so this one person at work was talking about how they get a lot of this certain type of email. It's like updates from people on their team, but it's like,
Yeah.
that very big team. And
Hmm.
so they've been using Notebook LM to take all of those update emails, turn them into a summary digest, export that as a podcast
So they can listen to
that's
it.
delivered by Google synthesized voices, and then she listens to it on her commute home or her
That's
commute
great.
to work or whatever,
Yeah,
right?
some people are good at that. They can digest better.
Yeah. And so those kinds of things, thinking about like learning differences and again, like my ex knowledge of the educational world is limited, and I also haven't been working in that world for a while.
Hmm.
So there are much better examples, I'm sure.
There's, yeah, I was just
But
going to touch on that. Yeah.
yeah,
One of the ladies that I just did a podcast last week, she works for a company called the Babel Group, and they actually worked with Google with, with people speaking, like some of the technology like the Alexas and all the Google Nest. They don't understand people that have speech issues. There's
right.
no database, so they actually were working with them to create a database for people who have not perfect speech so
Yeah,
that
that's
these
awesome.
devices can understand what they're saying and
Hmm.
make it accessible to them. So,
Yeah.
technology is great, but it's like it's accessible to the mainstream. Some things aren't accessible to people with special needs. And there's a lot of talk, inclusion. There's a lot of people with special needs. They should be included too. And it would be, and some of this tech, that was one of the things I used to love watching tech, like Revision 3 is I took a lot of that tech that I was like you, a tinkerer, and say, hey, how can I make this work with assistive
Yeah.
technology? How can I meld these two together so that somebody has access to this?
Yeah.
You know?
So I recently got access at work to Claude Code. Um, and so my my understanding of I may get some of this wrong in my explanation. So caveat emptor, and anybody listening, feel free to correct me where I'm wrong. But there's this whole like new class of tools, AI tools that went viral very quickly called claws. People are calling them claws. And
Hmm.
they're essentially like these frameworks that allow AI systems to do like longer tasks and to keep context. And so without getting too far into it, like when ChatGPT first came out a couple of years ago and this whole explosion started, one of the common early complaints was like the chatbot would forget what you were talking about and you had to like re-enter stuff and you would waste tokens and it would cost you money and it would take
Right.
time and it was frustrating and everything. And that's, along with everything else, has gotten much, much better over time. And so now what these tools do, OpenClaw was like the one that really went popular, and there are a bunch of other kind of spin-offs, and then Claude Code, I think, is similar conceptually, but different. But basically, what they let you do is ask for a more complicated task, and then the system can go off and do it, and it can keep working in the background for like long periods of time to, take more complex tasks and break them down and attack them. And these systems, some of the systems now can have multiple what they call agents running at the same time. So
Hmm.
like I might have one that's, I don't know, doing research while I have another one that's like building the front end for my eventual web interface that's going to use the information the research agent is finding, or something like that, right?
Right.
Um, and so Claude Code is one of these systems that's made by Anthropic, which is one of the huge leading AI research labs, and Claude is their LLM, their AI model. And
Mhm.
so Code has these additional features to just go off and do like long tasks. And I can just ask it, in my situation, right? Like I've been using it recently to try to automate a couple of my workflows that are usual workflows. And so one involves looking through podcast transcripts for quotes and themes and clips that, maybe we want to make a video clip out of this section. Ooh,
Hmm.
this thing this guest said would make a really good pull quote to use in social media, that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
And so I've been using AI for a while to help me with tasks like that with text. Recently, I started messing around with um, a video editing program called FFmpeg. It's like an open source
Hmm.
command line video editor, right? And so to try to automate some of the actual video editing process. And I got to a certain point with it, but like to get it to run, you had to go to a terminal shell and enter, command line, things. And it wasn't like user friendly if I wanted
Right.
to be something that some of my colleagues
Yeah.
could also
No, it
use.
didn't have a GUI, a graphical
There's
user
no
interface.
GUI, there's nothing,
Old
right?
school hitting the terminal.
Exactly. So when I got Claude Code Access, I basically asked it to look at what I had already, and I had built this with the help of a chatbot. I didn't do it on my own. I vibe
Right.
coded, But I asked, this new, more advanced system to look at what I'd done, and I told it what I was trying to do. And it came up with a way to like redo it so that it was better and it had a GUI, a web
Hmm.
interface. And then it also combined the video editing functionality into it so that it's not perfect yet, but basically, like I upload my video clip, I upload a timestamp transcript because that's where it gets the cues to edit the video. And I hit go, and it goes through and it picks out the clips and it cuts 5 clips and it presents them to me to review. And it gives me a little explanation of why it chose each clip, and it gives me a little transcript of each clip. And so now, instead of spending however long it would spend me to manually read through the transcript, flag the things that I want, go back, we had been just sharing over text. So my colleagues, I would tag sections of a Word doc or a G
Hmm.
doc, and then they would look and review and say, "Yeah, I like this clip. No, I don't want to use that one. Let's use that one." And we gather all the opinions, and then I would go and I'd manually edit the clip. Now I hit the button. It takes honestly 2 minutes, maybe. To be
Yeah.
fair, I'm using a really good system on really good hardware because of my job, but even still,
Right.
like it's not going to take much longer over,
Right.
a consumer over the cloud, right? And it comes back with like the 5 clips. And so instead of trying to imagine what video clip we want by looking at text, we can now like actually watch the clips. And it's just, when you do that every week and you do that process every week at your job, being able to automate and compress is just like, this is amazing,
Right.
right?
Well, it frees you
And
up to do
so,
other things.
yeah. And so if I can ask Claude to build this thing for me. And we go back and forth and ask questions, and it's not like you hit one button, you wait, and it's perfect. It's iterative, but still, like if I can do that, I can also, you know, describe the learning challenges, the learning style, the particular strengths and difficulties that I'm having, or my kids having, or my students having. and spin up these custom applications. In the business world, they're talking about what do they call it? The SaaS, the SaaS apocalypse, right? Like software as a service,
Right.
SaaS. Like all this talk that like these vibe coding tools are going to put software as a service companies out of business because everybody can just spin up custom software where
Right.
they need it, right? In the business world, that's kind of what we talk about.
Right.
In the education world, I mean, as an outsider now, but thinking about it, like the potential, for sort of customized learning and like just being
Right.
able to better adapt to what individuals need, like it's really, really powerful. And I'm not saying it's going to solve everything. I'm certainly not
No.
saying, the tech should take the place of human teachers or anything like
No.
that. But it's just like it's one of the most malleable tools that I've ever come across, and can sort of imagine.
Right.
Um,
It can open
and
doorways. I mean, I was going to say, like some of these software I see that they can, if you're not even a coder, like if you know, have an idea, the AI will do the coding for you. It's like, there's a lot of teachers that have ideas. They're not coders, but it's like, hey, I know I could, if I could do this, this would help this kid or it would help somebody else. And, this, like you're talking about now, this could make this
yeah,
possible.
yeah. And I know from experience, I know from my wife is an educator, she's an administrator now. Um, oh, sorry, that the beeps when I got in the recording, I'll say that again. Give me 1 second, sorry. Or no, that's okay. Um, yeah, I mean, I know from my own experience in the classroom and in schools, like way back when, but now from being a parent of school age kids, but mostly because my wife is still an educator. She's an administrator now, but you know, it, her daily life is about students and families and such. I know that schools still have a lack of resources and a lot of schools have a lack of technology resources or like super tech savvy people, right? But as you said, the barrier to creation bar for spinning up software is becoming low enough that like the notion that you could have one or two experts in a school who either could build things that other people could use or like the train the trainer model, you
Hmm.
know, thinking back to when I was doing projects with teachers in schools, and these were like so much simpler than the things we're talking about now. But that level of that gap between tech savvy and non-tech savvy, in some ways, I think like it's looking back on it, it's so much bigger because the literal language was so different, right? Like if you're not used to using computers and using tech tools and everything, and thinking about 10 years ago, and you want to try to like make something, you have to know how spreadsheets work or how,
Right.
a drawing, a design program works or whatever, right?
Exactly.
And so being able now to describe in natural language is really,
Yeah, it's taking those barriers away.
it's amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to wind up running out of time. If you have a moment, I would like to just maybe start another chat, just finish up a little bit with that, and then maybe talk about some of the virtual reality stuff you did for now.
Yeah,
All right. So we're back with Noah Kravitz, and we're kind of following up on, we were talking about generative AI, and Noah was explaining about Claude, about how he's able to design and engineer or basically reshape things to make things work better and put things together that normally would be very intensive or a lot of
beyond
tasks.
beyond my scope of knowledge on my own, definitely.
So that's pretty amazing. Like I said, imagine, if we had this 10 years ago or 15 years ago,
Right. Yeah.
but we're talking now, 2026. If we get back, if I'm still doing this podcast in 5 years, I guarantee we're like, wow, could we, what's happening now? We would never have thought
I,
15
I
years ago.
you know, you never know what's going to happen, but I think in the realm of technology and technology impacting the world, I think it's going to be a pretty eventful 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, without a doubt. I wanted to circle back a little bit about a project that you had done, I know with your dad.
Yeah.
chronic solutions.
Yeah.
I kind of jumped over that, but you know why? It's like you have such a huge resume. I
Yeah.
normally
I
don't
can't
take
sit
notes,
still.
but I'll have like a page and a half of notes just on your
I
resume.
you might I
So
can't I yeah. No, I freelanced a lot.
yeah, you did a lot. You did a lot. Um,
Um,
but
but
yeah, like to
yeah,
just talk about that because that was like kind of emerging tech, and you used
yeah,
it for it was. I would consider that assistive tech. You were helping people.
yeah. Man, I don't even remember how long ago it was, but I was at a basketball game with my dad, and he asked me if I knew anything about virtual. I should back up a step. So my father is a retired clinical psychologist who devoted a lot of his career to uh, neuroscience and neurofeedback techniques. He used a lot in his work with patients and researching how the brain works, and in particular how the brain processes and controls and triggers feelings of pain. He works a lot with chronic pain patients, people who were injured on the job and had workman's comp injuries, or people who had I mean all manner of things, but that qualified for chronic pain, right? Just like pain that wouldn't go away. And so this is, like I said, maybe 10-ish years ago, and maybe a little less. And or no, because we were working on it, I think a little during the pandemic, right? So more, yeah, f 5, 7 years ago, whatever it was.
Hmm.
And so the genesis is we're at a basketball game, and he suddenly, turns to me and asks if I know anything about virtual reality. And I was like, a little. Why? And so he told me, I don't recall now exactly what the origin of it was, but somehow I think he had read something. That's what it was. Okay. I think this all started that he had come across an article about, oh, and I feel so badly, I can't remember the name of the program, but these doctors, researchers up, I want to say at the University of Washington had, you know what? I'm on the internet and I'm going to look this up real quick because I don't want to get it wrong.
Sure, sure. No, but you had used your cell phone, your days of cell phone, like with I think there were Samsung phones you were using, right?
Yeah,
To do
yeah,
the
yeah.
VR.
Okay. Yep. So, okay. These yeah, okay. Hunter Hoffman and David Patterson, both researchers at the University of Washington. Okay, I wanted to give credit there. They developed this VR app called Snow World. And the idea was that I think they used it with burn
Burn
victims.
victims. I remember you
Yeah.
telling me that.
Yeah. And so they created this virtual reality world where it was snow and cold and throwing snowballs and things like that. And they did, clinical trials or whatever that form of testing was called, but they
Hmm.
did like, they researched it the right way. They did it legit. And they found that the VR was effective in reducing the perceived feeling of pain in these patients when they were having their burns treated, which by all descriptions is a very painful
Hmm.
process. And so they would put on the VR goggles and play this snow world experience while undergoing the treatments. And it like significantly reduced the patient's, reported level of pain.
It's shifting the
And
mind, I guess, right? Just
yeah,
shifting
yeah.
focus.
Right. And so, so he asked if something like that might be feasible for chronic pain patients he works with. And so we went on this journey together. And I mean, super cool that I was able to do this with my father, right? And we were able
Right.
to work on this thing together. Um, and because he after they it doesn't matter, but he lives locally. When they retired and we had kids, they had grandkids, and they moved out to where we are. So he's not too far away, so we were able to do this. But so basically, um, he had done research into neuroplasticity and this idea of being able to retrain your brain and like carve new neural pathways in your brain essentially to like change the way your brain functions.
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole idea was like, could we come up with a VR experience that could help people not only reduce their perception of pain while in the experience, but also kind of use it as a way to see if we could help people kind of retrain themselves in the way that they process these feelings of pain.
Right.
I don't want to overstep here and say things that
Right.
are wrong, but if I recall correctly,
Right.
the whole idea is like a lot of it is, like phantom pain, where like there is no injury that shows up on an examination or on an X-ray or an
Mm-hmm.
MRI or scan or whatever. And maybe there was an injury, but it's since healed. Maybe there's not actually an injury, but whatever the case,
The
it's
body's still
like this,
registering it.
yeah, the pain is just sort of existing on its own
Mm-hmm.
almost, right? And so we wound up building a VR experience. I built the first version of it in Unity, and then we wound up working with a development company that had, experience building VR apps like for real, and had them build out a version, that was much better than what I could do.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was this, yeah, it was like this experience where you're in the snow and there are these different scenes you go through that have different focuses on like hot or cold or light or no light. It's like set in a snowy place, but you go into this cabin and there's a fire and you have these different things.
Mm-hmm.
And then my dad had this idea that we played with around using a physical object that the person would hold in their hand. And the idea was like to kind of train you to kind of use the object as a physical
The
trigger.
bridge. Would it be like a
Yeah,
bridge to the augmented reality to actual physical,
thank
like I
you.
guess to
Yeah.
connect it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we only got as far as testing it with a small number of people ourselves. We tried to get some funding. We had a connection to a local hospital system and were able to like meet with them and they were interested, but we were just never able to like get a more formal
Mm-hmm.
pilot program off the ground, unfortunately. But yeah, this was a while ago and the technology wasn't as advanced as it is now. And again, like the first round of testing we did was on a prototype that I built, which was, pretty rough. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
like, I mean, it was usable. And we were working with an older population of volunteers and, people my parents knew, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their age. And they're smart, savvy people, but none of them had done VR before. So even
Right.
like a relatively rudimentary experience was still like, whoa.
Yeah.
Um, but they reported that it helped. And yeah, to what you said, I got a hold of a bunch of Samsung had this this system where they had like a headset
Yeah.
that didn't have it had lenses, but it didn't have
Right.
anything,
You dropped the phone in there.
you dropped a phone
I
into it, right?
remember when
Yeah.
they, yep.
Yep. So we bought a bunch of used Samsung phones and a bunch of these headsets and ran it off of that. And then I met some folks from a company called Pico at a show I went to, and they they lent us one of their headsets to work with, and we got some. And then the Meta headsets came out, the first generation of
Yeah.
like they were pretty affordable, but they had the electronics built in, so you didn't need the
Right.
whole phone thing.
Right. Right.
Um, yeah, and it was I wound up meeting some people both in the VR AR world and also in the psychology world. We actually went and presented at a American Psychological Association conference, which is pretty cool. We just did a poster, we can do like a talk, but still like it was,
Right.
it was really
That's
cool.
kind of cool.
Yeah. And like there was something there. And I don't know if like the way we were going about it was necessarily going to be like the right path to go or not, but definitely, something there. And yeah, eventually I think we just kind of ran out of steam slash I think I wound up getting some kind of work situation that was more of a full-time thing and I didn't have as much bandwidth. But we also had kind of hit our limit on like we got to the point where what we really needed was sort of a CEO type figure who was already in the medical
Right.
tech world.
To bring it
Because like,
further, to get it to the next
yeah,
level.
yeah, like, and there's a theme, right, with me, with Tabula Project and with this, like the tech part of it and thinking about how the tech could actually solve a problem
Hmm.
and getting creative about it and being able to like build a prototype. That's what I'm good at. The next level of turning that into a business or,
Hmm.
a funded organization of
Right.
some sort, not my not my bailiwick. So kind of hit a natural end there. But yeah. Um
Well, I guess it's all about the journey, though. I mean, now with the technology that's around now, I don't know. That might
I
be.
mean, I was thinking, my back brain was thinking as you were asking, and then as I was answering, like, what if I asked Claude, right? What if I wrote out a description
I
of
saw
this
the
thing?
smoke coming out of your head. I said,
Exactly.
he's thinking. I said,
It's
that
not
brain's
hard to
like,
see.
wait a minute.
Yep. I'm like, when we're done here, Vinny, shoot me a transcript of this conversation. I'll load the relevant part into, Claude Code or one of these agentic AI systems and see what it says, if it can spin up a thing. But yeah, I mean, there were, man, I don't know where to take, my instinct is to want to take what we just talked about and somehow sort of like wrap it up in a way that transitions into something else. But really, my transition is like, there's so much technology out there that can be adapted to fit different situations.
Right.
And it's not the kind of thing that comes naturally to everybody,
Right.
right? I
Right.
mean, I'm not saying like, everybody should be able to do this. I don't mean like that at all, but I just mean
Yeah.
like there is the potential to help solve so many kinds of problems that humans encounter, all the time, right?
That's why I was
And
excited
it's,
to see, for assistive tech, like what it could do, because there's so
yeah,
much tech.
yeah,
Like I said, I'm a tech junkie, and on the consumer side, like you were, but it's like your mind and not my mind's thinking the same thing. It's like,
yeah,
well, you know what? You could probably use this to do that, and this
yeah.
might be able to do what
I,
solve the problem.
yeah, I think maybe a good way to try to express what I was sort of trying to think through out loud before is that here's maybe a way to say it. So ChatGPT came out in like late 2022, I think it was. So as soon as it hit, I started fantasizing about how can I build a system where my office, where I'm talking to you right now, my home
Hmm.
office is in my basement. So literally, I'm like, and at the time I was freelancing and I had a few different clients. I was mostly doing content creation for, mostly
Hmm.
writing, but some other stuff also, right? And so I was like, how could I set up a system so in the morning I make a cup of coffee, I bring it down to the office, I hit a button, I wait, and then my work's done, right? That was kind of like the fantasy, right? And
Yeah.
I tried to do it, and there were some very early things, I forget what they were called, like, I don't know, auto, baby AGI, and these sort of very, soon as ChatGPT came out, developers started trying to think about like, how can I automate this automation even
Right.
more,
Right. Right.
and it wasn't there yet. And I screwed around with some of these open source things that like just ran in a loop on my computer till I hit stop and didn't generate anything useful and that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's now what, like 3.5 years later, late 2022, early 2026, right? 3.5 years
Hmm.
later. And I'm not saying this is going to happen. I don't think it should happen. Um, but there are like serious conversations going on about if and when this stuff is going to take over white collar work, right? So, like 3.5 years later, my little fantasy about setting up a generative AI based system to like crank out my writing work for me.
Hmm.
Now we're talking about this on a global scale of like, this might actually happen and
Right.
right? So I think to say that, and that's sort of a negative, maybe slanting example to think about, but to pull it back to what you were saying and what we were talking about, you know, um, during those 3.5 years, I personally, and I'm not, I'm a technically inclined person, and I've worked in tech for a long time and all that, but I'm not a software developer, trained or otherwise, right?
Hmm.
I have gone through this process of trying to like, as these tools advance, of trying to like figure out, how close can I get to that? You know, I get my content brief, I stick it into the system gives me my article, and it's actually a good article. And I've gone through iterations of that, and I've gone through iterations of that using products off the shelf, trying to like tinker with things and put them together into my own and and get something out of it. And like now we've evolved to the point where I'm doing a lot of that stuff day to day at work, right? Like
Right.
I've been able to cobble together these little solutions. And when I say cobble together, as we've been saying, I'm just writing natural language into the system
Right.
and we're working together and the system's writing the code. I'm not
Right.
writing the code, right? And like I'm using these workflows every day to write articles. And in my case, it's a first draft and I go through it, I review it. Human in the loop is so important, right? So I'm not like trying to like, it's doing all of it for me, but like I did a podcast interview with an NVIDIA researcher last year who was talking about how like, the systems could maybe get to 70, 80% of the work you were trying to do,
Hmm.
right? And so on the one hand, people are asking like, well, when's it gonna get to 100? And his answer to that was like, dude, 80 is really
Yeah.
great. Like think about 80 right now,
Right.
and how much
Right.
time that would save you and free you up to do other
Right.
things. And that's where like my work life is at with not with everything, but with the tasks that are these like on the computer tasks that I do. We do a podcast mostly every week. And so every week I'm doing these same
Same thing.
things,
Right. Repetitive
you
stuff.
know, after the podcast.
Right.
And it's like it's here, right? And again, it's not hit the button 100%, but it is that 80%. And it's now to the point where it's not just text. It's not just a written article, but it's code, it's audio, it's
Hmm.
video, it's code that can generate graphics and interactive things and such. And
Hmm.
so like I think, you know, thinking about this path and where we're at on it now and thinking about it relative to relative to anything involving software, but trying to think about it relative to assistive tech and what I know about assistive tech. Like there's never been a better time to try to create a piece of technology that will help you as an individual or as a group or whatever, but like
Hmm.
you as an individual do things in a way that works for what makes you you, right?
Right.
And whether that's the way you naturally learn, the way you like to approach projects, physical or mental or other, challenges or differences or
Yeah.
like whatever it is, styles, quirks of thinking, ways you like to do stuff, like you like to be really involved or not so involved, or you're the kind of person who thinks out a whole plan first, or you're the kind of person who just like picks up the hammer and starts hitting nails. Like
Yeah.
again, I'm not saying it's a magic solution to everything,
But it's a
but
tool.
it's a
It's a,
tool
yeah.
and it's amazing how flexible and powerful of a tool it has become, and it's not slowing down. And,
No.
you know, um, and a
The
lot
old,
of that is due to the natural language stuff that's
right.
emerged over the past 5 years in particular. But it's not all that. And you don't have to be somebody who regularly types or speaks to use this stuff, right? There
Right.
are like
Right.
so many, creative and
There's
useful
there's one guy I think
interfaces. Yeah.
who's figured this all out.
Who's that?
George Jetson. from the cartoon. Remember when you would
I
go to
was I
work?
was thinking like Kurzweil or somebody like that,
No,
but George
George
Jetson,
Jetson.
1,000,000%.
I
Yeah,
mean, really, we're thinking about it. He gets, it's like, this is what I kind of envision like AI, like you said, if it takes over, you just go to the desk, still human intervention. He presses a few buttons, it gets all the stuff that comes out.
yeah, right, right. Yeah, totally. Um, yeah, and he's got Rosie. I mean, Rosie was really
The
the
best
key.
made robot that you could ask
She
for.
kept that house going, man.
That's it.
We all know George, lovable, but had his shortcomings. But yeah, and we don't have time to get into this now, but
No.
you know, now the big thing in the industry in this early part of 2026, or there are many big things, but one of the big things is physical AI. And it's taking what we've been talking about and wiring it up to physical machines, humanoid robots, robot arms,
Right, to
um,
assist. Yeah.
automated coffee machines. These are the things I'm thinking about in my world, but like,
Right.
in the assistive tech world, whatever it is. And the AI being able to communicate with, control, but also get data back from sensors and cameras on the let's just call it a robot, whatever it is,
Right.
right?
Even if a person, like a person who's maybe a paraplegic, right? And they have a harness, like a chassis they get into, they
Yep.
can walk again because now they got cameras to help out. I mean, they have
Yeah.
assist, they're
Yeah.
getting data. It's like live, it's
It's
active,
like that's exactly what it is. And to me, a lot of the big difference is it's that live back and forth thing,
and it's fast. That's the
and it's
thing.
fast,
Very
and
fast. As long as you have
then
high speed internet.
right. And then the learning capability, the self-learning
Right.
capabilities,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. But
So,
another conversation for another time.
yeah.
But a lot of, I think for all of the concerns that we started this conversation talking about, I think you said like people either love AI or hate it, right? For all of the concerns and all of the very, very real reasons to be, well, to have concerns
Hmm.
about AI and to act on those concerns and push for things like more environmentally sustainable ways of doing this stuff, right?
Right.
Or more AI models that are not biased towards the English language, right? To your point
Right.
about,
Yeah.
you were talking, I think, about
With
spoken
people that
language.
speak spoken language,
Yes,
if they
no
have
speech impediments, right?
speech
Exactly.
impediments or
But
they have
that,
trouble, yeah,
yeah,
articulation.
it's that same thing. It's that expanding out, it started with the people who built it and, that whole like building your own image kind of thing, right?
Hmm.
So we've got a lot of like English language based models
Hmm.
and whatever, right? But there are these opportunities, and it's easier than it ever has been to expand this stuff to be more inclusive. And so we need to be concerned and active about these things. But on the other side, there are just so many positive things happening,
Right.
and there's so much potential now, I think, coming to, the individual user level, or the level of like you can come up with an idea and kind of like prototype it out and show it to the people you work with,
Right.
and
It,
go.
and
It's
I
just,
think with all the stuff that's out there, it kind of retrains how you think. Because now it's like, now this is possible. Like before, you kind of get tunnel vision or you get in a box and say, okay, well, I only could do this and this because that's all that's there. But now it's like the boundaries are kind of taken away.
yeah,
So it
yeah,
changes how you start thinking like, wait a minute, I never thought about, but now we could do this. So,
yeah, yep,
it just, like you said, it just opens up a whole new world.
yeah,
And I think
yeah,
that would be a whole different podcast after
yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So. Um, I guess we'll wrap it up, Noah, because I appreciate all your extra time to speak to us. I mean, we could go on for hours. I mean,
No,
you have it.
totally. This is fun.
So, but
There is a human being who's soon going to be waiting for me to pick them up.
yep,
So, real world first
yep,
always.
yeah.
But yeah,
So
no, it's
maybe
yeah,
we'll get you back on another time, Noah. We can maybe
love to.
brainstorm about maybe a different topic and get on there. It was good to talk to you
Absolutely.
again. Good to see you, brother.
Good to see you,
And
Vinny. Thank you for inviting me.
so, guys, this is another one in the books. And I'm your host, Vinny Lavodi, for Assistive Tech Today podcast. And again, our gracious guest, the man on the street when it comes to AI, Noah Kravitz. And we'll see you guys all on the next podcast. Take care. Thanks, Noah.
Thank you,
Be
Vinny.
well.